Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Girdhari Radha Girdhari Radhe. Jaya Radha Girdhari Radha Girdhari Radhe. Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ke Jam Vishpad Paramahamsa Pravijakacharya Ashottara Sata Shri Srimade Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ke ISKCON BBT founder Charya Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ke Grantaraj srimadbhagavatam ke Samaveda Gaura Bhaktavrinda ke Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nivishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarne. We're getting to hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 25th Chapter, Characteristics of King Puranjan. Text number 46. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Panchadvarastu porastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipavarnaye Panchadvarastu porastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipavarnaye Panchadvarastu porastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipavarnaye Panchadvarastu parastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipavarnaye Panchadvarastu parastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipravarnaye Panchadvarastu parastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipravarnaye Panchadvarastu parastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipravarnaye Panchadvarastu parastya Dakshinaika tatotara Paschame dve amushamte Namani nipravarnaye. We have the mic for the, you're the man. Pancha, 5. Dvara, doors. 2. Then. Paurastya, facing the eastern side. Dakshina, southern. Eka, 1. Tata, also. Uttara, 1 toward the north. Paschame, similarly, on the western side. Dve, 2. Amusham, of them. Te, unto you. Namani, names. Nipa, O king. Varniye, I shall describe. I'm going to read yesterday's verse leading into today's. Of the 9 gates in that city, 7 were on the surface and 2 were subterranean. A total of 9 doors were constructed, and these led to different places. All the gates were used by the city's governor. Today's verse, my dear king, of the 9 doors, 5 led toward the eastern side. Bless you. 1 led toward the northern side. 1 led toward the southern side, and 2 led toward the western side. I shall try to give the names of these different doors. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Of the 7 doors on the surface, namely the 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and 1 mouth, 5 look forward. And these are described as the doors facing the eastern side. Since looking forward means seeing the sun, these are described as the eastern gates, where the sun rises in the east. It's so cool to hear Vedic culture perspective. Going forward means going toward the sun. It's in the east. Just a little tidbit, but it's so cool. The gate on the northern side and the gate on the southern side represent the two ears. And the two gates facing the western side represent the rectum and the genitals. All the doors and gates are described below. Need some help here. Could we pray together? Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnanjana Salakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gunave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shirta Padikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shivashakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karana Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhana Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakopatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're talking about doors here, gates. And these are, figuratively speaking, the gates of the city, which represents the body, and the gates or doors represent the different senses. How many senses or gates are being listed here, Dr. Alex? And we sometimes discuss the categorization of the senses as working senses and knowledge-acquiring senses. Do you mind giving the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses? Do you know what they are? You use the microphone, it's nice.
Tasting.
That's one.
Hearing. Seeing, tasting, and touching, grabbing, smelling.
That's 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. And although there's only 9 gates, there's 10 senses categorized. So now what are the working senses? Now, how's the tongue working? He said the tongue already tasting. You're right. Just how is it? Why is it? That's not tasting? Isn't it talking? Working senses, it's talking. You can communicate. That's how you get a lot of work done. 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Should have said, for their sake. Some might not know these things. So, number 1.
So hands, nose, tongue or mouth, genital organ, and...
Your nose shouldn't be in there. You're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong.
Oh, nose isn't in the working senses?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. And ears is? Or no? No, I'm forgetting.
I think you better say, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure though.
Okay, Dr. Alex, use your working senses to get it. He just did. That's a hint.
The one you miss is legs.
Legs. Okay, that's 1. Go to the other 4 now.
So legs, hands or arms, then talking, and genitals.
And
Those four. Isn't there?
it is.
Oh.
We'd be in trouble in this material body without an anus. Trust me. When it doesn't work, when the system doesn't work, they actually sometimes have to cut bags into the intestines so that they... Nasty business, the body, when you pull the pretty wrapping aside. But anyway, we're talking about the senses and how they're the gates. It's through those gates, through the senses, that we perceive and we try to control and exploit this material world. They tend to get us in trouble. There's an example with the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses in relationship to different species and how those senses can be the cause of their ruination or death. Has anybody heard this analogy? Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3. We haven't heard from you, Damodar Kumar. I'll give you a tip. What in old days, Vedic culture, how did they catch it? How would a hunter attract a deer to kill it for its meat? Any idea? Have you heard this from Srila Prabhupada? You have to use the mic.
Is he attracting the deer with the sound of a flute?
Yeah, so what senses is causing his downfall?
Sense of fear?
Yes. Thank you.
Mm.
Okay, how about the moth? We need a mic that would simultaneously manifest in front of each devotee thinking, oh, I alone have the
Sight.
microphone. Sight. So his eyes, and what does he see that causes his death?
Fire.
The fire. Okay, so that's seeing and that's hearing. How about the tongue?
Fish.
Yeah, they see something wiggling there, that worm or what have you, and then the worm on the hook. And then they're in this frying pan, in the skillet. Okay, that's 3. What else do we have? The elephant. Not actually a knowledge-acquiring sense, but...
The she-elephant is in front of a pit, and the male comes after her and falls into the covered pit. I don't know how they get him out of there, but that's how they catch him.
I think what they do, they starve him for a good while, and they weaken him, and then they
got to dig it out, I guess, so
Yeah.
they can pull him out.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
how can you
yeah.
get him out?
So, okay, that's 4, and I think there's one other, isn't there? Ah, what is that? Please remind me.
The
What's the bee attracted to?
the bee gets attracted to sense of smelling, and then they go inside a lotus flower, and then at night it closes and it gets trapped and dies.
This is why we associate with devotees. I had forgotten the last one. So yes, if a bee gets so absorbed in the honey of a lotus flower, when the sun goes down, that lotus closes, the bee can die inside. We want to be more explicit. They have the flower in South America that is do you say carnivorous? It eats insects anyway. And it's a very beautiful flower, and then flies in there. Oh, wow. And then you've probably seen it in, whatever. So these senses are paths leading to death. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that of all the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and uncontrollable. Very difficult to conquer the tongue. It's the prominent sense for us humans. We like to gab, blah, 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 and we like to eat. And boy, do people these days like to eat. Obesity is a huge problem in America. It's part of the reason why probably people are so frightened that, I might be one of the, unlucky ones to pass away from COVID. If you have obesity, then you are starting out with 1 strike or 2 strikes against you, using the old baseball analogy. 3 strikes, you're out of here. So it's a big problem. Supersize me, as they used to say. Take the big gulp. Why take only what you need? Take more than you need. So anyway, the senses, they are a big problem if they're not controlled. And of course, people try to control them in different ways. The Gyanis, by their knowledge, this is all illusory, this isn't real, so I'm going to restrain myself, even though it's beckoning. The objects of the senses are beckoning to the, to the mind, to the senses and mind. Come on, come on. What was it? Ulysses strapped to the mast of his ship so that he could hear the sound of the sirens. It's old Greek mythology. It was said it was such a beautiful song they would sing, so alluring, and it caused many a captain and ship to crash on the rocks of their island and then become enslaved by the sirens. So you can't just put your arms stretched out. No, 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 no. You can for a while. I mean, that is done. Same way with Ashtanga yoga, niyama, yama, do's, don'ts like that, and trying to engage in a mechanical process. But not very intelligent if you've heard of a better alternative. And of course, the better alternative is engaging the senses in the transcendental service of the Lord. Vishayavinivartante niraharasya dena rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishva vartate. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he's fixed in consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada explains that when someone is sick, just like me, I've said the tongue's most voracious. I don't like the result of overeating. I love feasting as much or more than the next Prabhu. When it's an occasion, boy, I like throwing myself into it. It's the vice of a Vaishnava. The what's your pleasure? Pashadam, Mahapashadam. So anyway, but I don't like the feeling of putting on pounds and becoming overweight. It affects the consciousness. I mean, speaking personally. So if you feast, what do you have to do? You have to fast. If you have a quota, like this is an interesting thing. Has everyone here heard of Mr. Rogers? He's probably one of the only people I know, practically speaking, who is in the mode of goodness. Just like, it's so rare in modern society, Western culture. I mean, they're there. Definitely, they're there. But he maintained his same weight for decades throughout his adult life. Because he ate the same things, and he exercised the same amount of laps in the pool every day. Regulation, there's a lot to be said for it. And he was vegetarian. And he definitely was a pious man who saw the good in everybody. I mean, boy, the world could use more like him. And his compass was based upon his belief in God. In fact, I'm getting here in the glorification of Mr. Rogers, don't mind, but he was trained in a seminar to be a preacher, a Christian preacher. And when he saw the garbage that the television was putting in the minds of the children, then he took it up as a mission that I'm going to give them something higher, something that will develop character, that will make them better people for having heard and seen what I share with them. So anyway, a mode of goodness. Sadhana bhakti is supposed to bring us to the mode of goodness. Bhakti has the potency that you get all the results of any of the other subsidiary processes. You want to become detached, like the goal of the yogis or the Gyanis? Engage in pure devotional service. A byproduct will be that you get detachment. Or the Gyanis especially emphasize acquirement of spiritual knowledge. You want that? Engage in devotional service. I think I've heard you quote the verse where the byproducts is Gyan and Vairagya. Do you know that verse? Do you mind sharing it with the mic? Do, 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 do,
Vairagya Vidya, Nija Bhakti Yoga, Siksartha Mika Purusha Prana. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Shri Hari Prabhupada Pastam Hambhavadye. That's Sarvabhaumacharya. That Lord Chaitanya has come to teach us renunciation, Vairagya Vidya, knowledge, and ultimately love of Krishna.
That's the summit, the result of knowledge. Like in this book, Chasing the Rhinos, Shyamasundar Prabhu had the good fortune of sharing the philosophy of the different Western philosophers. And one statement that stuck with me, a one-liner, is that Srila Prabhupada said that philosophy is meant to be practical. It's meant to have practical application or activity that can be based upon it. If it's just armchair philosophy, even up to the point of srimadbhagavatam, people learn the Bhagavatam, people learn the Bhagavad Gita, people can quote the shlokas, etc. But then if after reciting Bhagavatam to others, they go off and they smoke their bidi, or after having exhibited ecstatic symptoms while discussing the highest pastimes of service to Krishna, then they take out the chilies from their nose, that which caused their tears to flow like one in bhava. If their mind, is another verse from the Bhagavad Gita, if one's mind is dwelling upon sense gratification, even though you are controlling your senses, basically you're a cheater. You're cheating yourself, and if you're trying to present yourself as being something or someone worthy of following, you're a cheater for others. So philosophy is meant to be acted upon. Vedanta, Darshan, the Bhagavat philosophy is the most practical. There's nothing that even comes close to the practical application of it, because the senses need engagement. Now, you could answer this question in so many ways, but Srila Prabhupada asked, what's the purpose of life? One time he said, the purpose of life is to enjoy. Now, who can't relate with that? Whether you're the bee flying into the lotus, or you're the king trying to enjoy his harem, or if you're a brahmachari trying to enjoy the pleasures facilitated or allowed in your ashram, everybody has the desire to enjoy, because by nature we are eternally enjoyers. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. We're his part and parcel. We have his qualities in minute quantity. So we also desire to enjoy eternally. But the only way we can enjoy is when we engage our senses, not in sense gratification, chasing after the objects of this world, the dreams of this world, the propaganda of the cheaters, but when we engage the senses in the service of Krishna's pleasure. When we use our senses to please Krishna's senses, then that's the perfection. And that's the taste that was described in this verse. If one's sick, you don't want to restrain yourself from eating. It's like we heard not too long ago, Sridhar Maharaj, when he was in his last months or even weeks when he was in Mayapur, he had this belly that was like highly, fluids of the body collecting and nasty stuff. And the last thing he needed to do was eat pizza and ice cream. But any time his servants weren't around and one of his friends could hook him up, he'd immediately say, "Get me some ice cream, will you? They're starving me here. Got any pizza?" And of course it would be prasadam, and he would honor it. He didn't care about his health at that point. I'm a dead man. I'm dying. Don't deny me my, the pleasure of honoring Krishna's prasadam. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport says a diseased man doesn't like being restricted from palatable dishes. But when you're healthy, you can enjoy them. You can eat them. There's no problem. In fact, when you're young, it's amazing how much you can abuse your body. That was one of the things they mentioned about Shamali yesterday in the memorial. Evidently, she could pack it away. Thin girl, thin lady, never put on the weight, even into her 30s. Now, when I was in my 20s, I could pack it away. But then once I start hitting 30s and the body's metabolism starts slowing down, then it starts showing. Because I used to be really skinny. Sometimes people, oh, man, you're thin. But no, not even. She could pack it away. So anyway, the point is, in Krishna consciousness, during the prosecution of your Krishna consciousness, cultivating Krishna service, Srila Prabhupada says, when one experiences the beauty of Krishna, then it's not a problem controlling the senses, because you automatically run to the service of the Lord. You will not engage in inferior engagement. The wise don't engage in the sources of misery. Anytime there's some enjoyment of the happiness of this world outside of Krishna consciousness, right behind it is the price tag. There's nothing free in this world. Not on the mundane platform. There's always the misery that's attached to it. If nothing else, you become attached to the pleasure that you experience, and then you want to do it again and again, and then when you leave the body, those desires are recorded within the mind, and those desires take you to another body to try and enjoy again and again. And sense gratification, when you analytically look at it, it's really interesting. I got this from Bhakti Vidyapurna Swami, hearing him speak. But everybody likes to enjoy, that's what we're saying. But when you stop, like when you're enjoying something and then you reflect on, wow, this is so good. Like it might be Damodar Kamar's pizza or whatever it may be. Man, this is so good. But once you start to reflect on the pleasure of the sense activity, it's gone. It's now a thing of the past. You're no longer enjoying it. You're looking back and reflecting upon the enjoyment. That's how time works. Present, and now it's become the past. But if you can stay absorbed, and it applies in spiritual life too, sometimes you get in the zone, if we're fortunate, in chanting Hare Krishna, meaning we are hearing the sound vibration, the transcendental sound vibration of Radha and Krishna in the form of their names. Sometimes and deeper, deeper. And when you stop and reflect, wow, this is nice. This is ecstatic. Hare Krishna, this is wonderful. Once you do that, then the train's broken. You've stepped off. You've gotten out of the zone. I've experienced it. I know I've spoken with the twins and other God brothers. So the present in the time in the spiritual world is the eternal present. And there is no stopping to reflect of how great this is. It's always the focus on pleasing Krishna. And because that's eternally going on, then eternally the pleasure is being experienced. And it ever increases in the unlimited variety of ways in which Krishna and his devotees reciprocate lovingly with each other in service. We have something, oh, what a bright future we have to look forward to. So this Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam Tat Partvaina Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakta Uchate. That identification with the body, that's the problem. The more we've engaged in sense gratification, the more we become bound up in the false ego that I am this body, no matter which body it may be, a hog's body, a demigod's body, my American body, etc. And that absorption is the trap. It's the allurement. It's the cause of our degradation and our death ultimately. But when we engage in the service of the Lord, who is the master of the senses, then not only to become purified of the misconception that I'm this body and mind. The mind's the hard part. Because there's that thought process. We're always thinking. You always hear a voice going on inside the head. And most people identify that voice as themselves. But it's not themselves. That's the mind telling them what I like and what I don't like. and thus they act accordingly. So the mind is just another material thing. We don't see it. It's not the brain, it's the mind. The brain is just a muscle of the gross body. But the mind is something different. It's the subtle body covering the spirit soul. So that's the tough one. And how do we purify the mind? We're saying we purify the senses by engaging them in the service of Krishna. We purify the mind by remembering Krishna, thinking of Krishna, using the mind and intelligence in how to become Krishna conscious and how to share Krishna consciousness. That's proper use of intelligence in the mind. Hare Krishna. Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindyo. If we become attracted by the beauty of Krishna, and look what a wonderful darshan it is today. Oh, their lordships are so beautiful. And if we can become attached and keep the impression of the darshan within our mind, then the beauty of this world, it pales in comparison. Just like I came back from Mayapur this time. It was after almost 6 months. Usually it's like 2.5, 3 tops. And when I come back, there's always a little bit of cultural shock. Thrown into SanDiego, Southern California, enjoyment beach attire, etc. And, you know, when you're in India, you see the ladies dressed so nicely in the beautiful saris, the, cultural attire of India. And then you come back here and you go to the beach, or even when I'm driving home, Labor Day, it's a huge thing, and you see these scantily clad ladies, and the senses are attracted. It's the way they're built. It's the way we've conditioned ourselves since time immemorial. And I always remember this saying that Bhakti Siddhanta Swami said. He said, you get one look. That's natural. You're looking, you see, and, it crosses your vision. But if you take that double look, that second look, then you're in Maya and you're asking for trouble. Because it all starts with contemplation of the senses. That's how the downward slope starts. By contemplating the senses, one becomes attached to them. By becoming attached, as the verse progresses. It's not advisable to stick one's toe into the ocean of Maya just to test the waters. The mentality of I can be moderate in my sense gratification is not a good plan, because the soul is not satisfied with sense gratification. You always have to amp it up or continue to be in the illusion that I'm enjoying, which really means you might for some time distract yourself from the constant misery that the body and mind inflict upon the living entity. So Krishna consciousness is the solution. The more we become absorbed in hearing and chanting, like the Bhagavatam is glorified by Lord Chaitanya as being such a potent process for reawakening love of Godhead. Everything that Srila Prabhupada has given us is the process whereby we can reawaken our love for Krishna in the fastest possible way. Generally, it's understood that it takes many lifetimes to attain perfection in Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada is saying, give this one life to Krishna. The purport being, give this one life to the representative of Krishna, Srila Prabhupada. Follow his instructions as the most important wealth that you have in your life. Utilize the shelter and the instructions of the spiritual master. And if you get the pleasure, if you please your spiritual master and he prays to Krishna, he blesses you, then it's a done deal. In one life we can become perfect. Now you don't get to go to Goloka Vrindavan until you've reawakened your Krishna prema. Only the prema bhaktas and bhaktins are there, what to speak of in Goloka Vrindavan. But Srila Prabhupada has said, I have the key, I have to the back door. He can take us to the manifest pastimes of the Lord. And there, in taking birth among the Vrajvasis, from our very birth, we can begin to be infected with the Vraja Bhakti. that the inhabitants have for Krishna in the manifest pastimes, exhibited in the manifest pastimes of the Lord in the material world. We're so very fortunate. So to hear this philosophy, to begin with, in Krishna consciousness, you have to hear what it's not, what it's not, what it's not, because we have so many misconceptions and so many attachments. But once you get the garbage out of the way, Maharaj used the word hubris. Once you get the garbage out of the way, then all the weeds, you've tried to clear the field. Now you can cultivate properly the process. If you don't take the instructions as they are and you tinker with them, or you try to do it the way you like it, not the way the spiritual master's told, then you don't get the bhakti creeper. You get the weeds, which Srila Prabhupada said can often very much appear like bhakti and can fool sometimes the very senior devotees, etc. Maya's good. She's expert. She's empowered by the Lord to test us, to see if we want to engage in Krishna's service or if we're just really faking it. So we need the association of each other so that we can support ourselves in this endeavor. And I wanted to read one thing. Vijay Prabhu saw, chasing the rhinos. Now, in the time of Shyama Sundar's service to the spiritual master in the late 60s and the early 70s, magic was the norm. Miracles were the norm. I just got through reading about when Srila Prabhupada went to India, say in 1971, I believe. Within 3 weeks' time, just a little bit over 3 weeks, in less than 1 month, he purchased the properties of Vrindavan, Mayapur, and Juhu Beach, and it laid the cornerstone for each one of them in the period of 1 month. Now, in India, I went to India in 1977. I will tell you, it was like going to another planet, because just to get a phone call made or to go to the post office, you could be talking about a day-long endeavor to do something simple. And it's not simple buying property in India. Oh my gosh. But by the mercy of Krishna, the miracles happen, because the pure devotee wants to serve the Lord so sincerely, so seriously with his life and soul. This is for your pleasure. This is in service of my spiritual master. And those who catch the mood of the spiritual master and engage their life energy, their words, their wealth, their intelligence in his service, then they can be instruments that witness the miracles in life. And this is a nice description. Shyama Sundar is saying, I'm seeing the world through Prabhupada's eyes. You plan, you point. Meaning I got a plan, now I'm starting to head that way. I'm starting to try to actuate it. Then you ease off to let Krishna spin the action around you. You watch for magic, the hints, the clues in this person, that letter, the butterfly that lands on your finger. Then you risk it all and leap into Krishna's delightful real-time dream. This mood of being on fire to please Srila Prabhupada, the spiritual master, is the formula for experiencing the taste that we're all anxious for. And we had to associate with advanced devotees and hear, as he said, I'm beginning to see through the eyes of Srila Prabhupada. These rubber eyeballs, what can they see? Last couple of classes have described their deficiencies. But when you start to rewire your thought process and your desires by hearing, taking it in, the transcendental instructions of the spiritual master, the transcendental knowledge, and it cleanses your heart, and you begin to talk about it. You chant more sincerely. You try to fan the desire. You try to cultivate within yourself the desire, because Krishna doesn't need anything that our senses in and of themselves can offer. Not the burfi, not the sandesh that me and you might be attached to, Not the flower garland, not the clothes, he doesn't need any of it. He's Madhava, the husband of the goddess of fortune. And we're offering things made out of matter, temporary, manifested energy of the Lord. And for us aspiring devotees, we're doing it with often some contaminated consciousness, some impure consciousness, or a nicer way of saying, I suppose, our consciousness is not completely pure. Now, you can be pure in consciousness even in the Kanishta stage if you focus your mind and have the intention properly situated. I want to please Guru and Krishna. If you engage in your activities conscientiously like that, that's pure devotional service. Keep at it. Keep practicing. You waver. The mind draws me here or there. You keep at it. You don't give up. You associate with those who inspire us, who encourage us, who give us shelter. Keep it up, and it becomes something we possess on our own by the mercy of the spiritual master. And in that consciousness, then we realize, my dear Lord, even though I'm so fallen, and to quote Srila Prabhupada verbatim, and so rotten, please accept this offering. And in that mentality of Krishna consciousness, you don't. This is a pastime that I shared with Vijay, and I was remembered by reciprocation between him and Maharaj this morning. In that consciousness, we don't think we're the doers. We're simply humble servants in the service of our spiritual master, and following his instructions by his mercy and the mercy of the Lord, miracles can happen. We don't have to be afraid of anything, because we're in the shelter of Guru and Krishna, and we intelligently try to surrender and serve them to the best of our ability. So are there any questions or comments in this regard? And if not, could we say 3 things that had some value or something that you might have retained in the class? Bhakti Glean, could you say one thing that you might have noted?
I like how, thank you for the class, by the way. One thing that I liked was when you said comparing their lordships to outside their pale, and it's true.
We got a convert here. 2? I just asked for 3 things.
I thought it was what Bhaktisiddhanta said about you get one look. You get one look, and then, yeah, I thought that was kind of a interesting point.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
He's not. He's a nephew, but he's sannyasa ashram, and it was a one-liner that stuck with me, because you see what you see, and then if you turn your attention toward it, focus on it, you're in Maya, and that just boils down. Put it in the harshest of terms to slap us out of the illusion. That's envy of Krishna. That's what keeps us in this world. Thank you for sharing that.
I was trying to wrap my head around the, you were referring to, you said Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami was making the point that sense gratification is immediately as you experience it, you're already
if you reflect upon how nice it is.
Yeah. And you're saying how the spiritual world's eternal present, which I've heard many times, but you're saying because you're constantly, you're never reflecting on how nice it was. You're never, you're constantly thinking of serving Krishna. You're constantly engaged in service to Krishna, so therefore you're eternally present. And the other, one other thing.
Can I say something? Because you just
Yeah.
sparked something in me.
Yeah.
The reason why we reflect on, wow, that was nice, is because life is, as I said last time I spoke here, is problematic and it's full of misery. So when something's nice, you want to take note. Wow, this is special. But in doing that, you've lost the pleasure itself. The engagement is over.
And another thing, you were saying how it's very important to first hear what bhakti is not, and then allowing the creeper of devotion to cultivate. Otherwise, it cultivates around so much garbage, and it's very difficult to get it out once it's so.
Yeah.
And the one
Can you give an example? You learn something wrong, and you come to Krishna consciousness, and because of that attachment, that conditioning, then you... Anyway, I could give several, probably.
Yeah, I don't want to give pointed examples. But also, did you say that Vrindavan, Mayapur and Vrindavan, within the first month that Prabhupada went to India?
No, I didn't say in the first month he went, but I said in the span
of a month.
Less than a month.
Less than a month.
He accomplished, through his servants, purchasing and laying the cornerstones.
For all those
he had to be there for the consummate, he was there for Vrindavan and Juhu. Vrindavan, they accomplished it on their own purchasing, but and then going and laying the cornerstone. Yeah, this book is, I highly recommend it. Most everybody's probably read it. If you haven't, this is where you get to see Srila Prabhupada as the person. Shyamasundar gets to share Krishna consciousness and the experience from his outlook, and he is very dear to Srila Prabhupada and had an intimacy in his relationship of service to Srila Prabhupada that some of us can only dream of. Sometimes devotees, until they really seem in it, they have more of a philosophized relationship with Srila Prabhupada. The personal one-on-one connection hasn't yet been established. It will be if you want it. He's more than willing. That's why he's sitting here and asked us to worship him every day in Guru Puja. It's not a ritual. It's meant to establish very strongly our relationship of service and our based on gratitude on what he's giving us. That was your question? 1 month?
Yeah, I was trying to hear that again. I wasn't familiar that it was so quickly, those 3 projects.
Yeah,
so,
it's just like...
Yeah.
That's why he makes mention of magic. Can you, Lakshmi? Can you wait, you have to use the microphone, Lakshmi.
Everybody knows what
You have to use the microphone.
I know everybody knows probably. One time Prabhupada was asking Shyamasundar Prabhu, what is the name we can put for Krishna in the Vrindavan? I read that one. He's asking Shyamasundar, what is the name I can put for Krishna?
For the deities?
For the deities.
In the Krishna Balaram Mandir?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, and Shyamasundar said, Shyamasundar. Prabhupada asked Shyamasundar so nicely, I could not understand what is the connection, but, and he said Shyamasundar.
That's called love between the spiritual master and the disciple and the spiritual master. Thank you. That's a perfect note to end on. Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki.